What is going on, my fellow UDL brethren? You got the good commissioner here, Matty Brolick, but I am not alone for a change. I actually have the corrupt commissioner alongside me.
He said I couldn't rank everyone at 13th, so I'm a little upset, but my mood will change as we go through the video.
Yep, he really wanted to do it. He was pushing for it. He even was willing to pay me, and I was like, listen, man, you're going to have to buy my shirt when I win the league anyway, so you could pay me then.
I offered to get you new gold teeth.
He did do that. It's like 150, 200 a tooth. I found that out yesterday, so pretty interesting information being shared in the UDL server. You never know what you're going to get. And we are actually here today to bring to you all the post-draft power rankings for Season 2. Now, I guess I already kind of spoiled the number 12 spots for you because I probably should have started on a page earlier. But anyway, what we're going to do with these power rankings, just to explain them, is rank everybody's drafts combined. So we're not going to have a separate ranking for all of Oras, separate all for Sun and Moon, and then for Sword and Shield. We kind of did that when we were like making the rankings to tally up, but it just would take kind of long to actually record a video with all three like that. So we're just gonna give some like brief comments on each draft and let you guys know why we ranked everyone where we did. And yeah, also before we get started, just want to make sure that I say before anyone takes it a little too harshly or personally, is that like drafting, even though it's obviously an important part of the draft format, it's probably by far the least important because you have a good amount of transactions you can make. You could always fix any holes your team might have. And also drafting is extremely subjective. So what looks like a good draft to Carson may be completely different for what looks like a good draft to me. And then also having played in that cash tour recently with drafting an actual team from the Pokemon manga that was only like 70 out of the 90 points. I know the drafts aren't that important. Like you can make it work.
You still botted me in mocks with that team.
Yeah, those mocks, but just everything with that team was really fun because it was just so goofy and it didn't have like half the things that you normally would want on a draft. And to some extent, I was still able to make it work. So it's just like, keep that in mind. That drafts aren't that important. We're not trying to hurt anyone's feelings or offend anyone. If anything, the drafts were really, really strong. I feel like the lowest I ranked a draft out of 10 was like 6. So they're all pretty good.
Yeah.
Just want to make sure I got that out of the way in the beginning so no one gets their feelings too hurt. But anyway.
An example for how subjective we can be is, if you guys saw Shuckle Kings, go read up on those. I actually have his like completely flopped, where some of the drafts that he had in his top 5 I have towards the bottom end of my Switch power rankings.
Yeah, exactly. You never know because drafting is just so subjective. Like, I tried my best to not be too biased towards the offensive teams, but no promises, boys. All right, without further ado, we will get right into it. As you can see here on the screen, it already reveals the two number 12 people. I guess I'll talk first about the X Conference because I ranked the X Conference, Carson ranked the Y Conference. We figured it would be too difficult to kind of rank 24 people each. It would just take a long time. So I'm handling X, and then Carson's handling Y. So first, I'll start off with number 12 in the X Conference, and it's got to be my boy Helmy. Listen, you all know I'm a big fan of Helmy's teams, and it's funny too because I was just telling Carson before the video started, is like going over his RS and Sun and Moon teams, despite them always having somewhat of like a, in my opinion, awkward assortment to them. I still thought they had like all the tools to be really good teams, just like a lot of good Pokemon together. But his Sword and Shield team is really what kind of brought him down. I think that was the lowest team that I ranked out of all the teams because he's got some really, really powerful threats. He's got like the Galarian Darmanitan, Gothitelle, Barraskewda, Dugtrio, a bunch of other, and he got like Dugtrio late. He had some really good late picks. He's got sticky webs he could use with that as well, but he's just missing a lot of things that I feel most drafts should look for, namely being like a steel type, a ground type. He does have Draco's ult as an electric immunity, but then you'd have to give up on Hustle, obviously. And then also, wait, did I say Dugtrio?
Yeah, you said Dougie.
Yeah, I said Dougie. Wait, yeah. Does he have Dougie and I just missed that? Very possible. Okay, so maybe he does have an electric immunity, but he also didn't have Stealth Rock, so that was...
Wait, does he have Dougie? I'm looking.
Or is
at
Dougie and Sun and Moon? Because I know one of them he got a late
okay.
Dougie, I thought.
Okay, yeah. He got Dougie and Sumo because I don't think he has it in Switch.
Okay, gotcha. All right, so I was gonna say, like, I looked over that team a few times, just trying to like make sure he didn't have a ground type, and yeah, so that hurt his team. No steel type hurt his team, and then especially not even having an option for Stealth Rocks, I felt really hurt that team. So overall, like I said, he's got a lot of power on the team. I know he likes to mess around with some trapping mons like Gothitelle, and he has sticky webs and some good breakers, but overall, amongst his 3 teams, because they have like a little bit of that awkward feel to me, wouldn't really be something that I would necessarily draft myself. I just figured he'd probably be the best fit at number 12 because of how far his Sword and Shield kind of brings his other 2 solid drafts down. But overall, like I said, Sun and Moon and RS were definitely solid, and Sword and Shield, I hope he proves me wrong because he's got some pretty cool techs on there, and I know he likes to get creative, so all you, Carson, if you want to talk about the Y Conference.
Alright, so I have Obi at number 12. I wasn't the biggest fan of his Oras draft. I think his fastest mon is Zardex, which 100 base speed is never good to have as your fastest mon. And then I did like his Sumo one, where he had the Magirna. The only problem I have with that draft is he had Double Fairy, Double Dragon, which I thought was a little bit repetitive, but I mean, any draft with Magirna is just going to be insane to beat. I did really like the Bolt in his Sumo. I think his Sumo draft is probably my favorite by far. And then I'm looking at his Swish draft right now, and once again, it's a little bit slow, but I mean, that could just be a preference style where I like to have things that are a bit speedier. But I do like his Swish because it kind of looks like a ladder team, and it has the big boy Dracovish. Yeah, overall, I think they're all viable, and I really do like his Sumo, and I do like his Swish a bit. I'm just not the biggest fan of his Oras, but he also has 10 transactions to fix that, so it's not a big deal.
Exactly, yeah, because when I looked at his RS team, like after he first drafted it, I was just like, whoa, he's stocked up on the threats. It's just like a little, it's laid out, I guess, awkwardly, but it's something that could definitely be fixed. The only thing is that, like I'll continue.
The attack stats on these Zard X, Azumarill, Hoopa Unbound, Rhyperior is insane, and then you just kind of look around like, where's your speed control? Because he doesn't even have, I mean, Hoopa's a good starter, and of course Ditto, but I don't know, like, if he would have had webs on this team or something.
Yeah, that would have been nice.
Better, in my opinion.
Definitely.
But, I mean, he used it really well. His game versus I, which I guess we have a little bit of bias because we saw week 1, but he's proved he can use a team super well. It's just a team that I would never be able to function well with.
Yep, exactly. Totally agree. All right, moving on to the number 11 for each conference. And don't get mad at me. Don't get too mad at me. I know you're the commissioner and everything, but try not to kick me from the server. Unfortunately, at number 11, I have the corrupt commissioner, Carson. And
my drafts are hogwash, don't worry.
It's funny, too, because, like, on your RS draft, you have a lot of Pokemon that I really like. I think just my biggest issue with your RS and Sword and Shield drafts was just, like, awkward, like, synergy. It just felt like they had power that had, like, a little bit of power and, like, a little bit of bulk, but just, like, not a solid enough either combination of both, or didn't lean towards one side enough, so it just felt a little messy. But then your Sun and Moon draft, I actually ranked pretty high towards the top because I really like the 8 Pokemon that you have. I usually think that, like, 8 Pokemon in general, as opposed to getting 9 or 10, is like a bit of a flaw, but that was pretty much the main flaw because I thought those 8 Pokemon work really well together. Obviously, it's got that Aki VGC tried and true famous core that we know has worked in Sun and Moon extremely well, even in this past DPL season. So I definitely am not worried about that Sun and Moon draft because then having the Megatar, which is one of my favorite Megas, and Lycanroc for a sand option, Celebi as just an extremely versatile glue Pokemon that could do wonders for that team. I think it's really good. It was just the other teams that I felt were kind of messy that obviously have the tools to do what you probably want them to do. It just seems like it'd be a little harder.
They don't have like complementary typings as much as I'd like, is I think my biggest type issue.
Right, I can see that. And that's pretty much all I have to say about those drafts. I don't want to get kicked from the server, so I guess we can move on to your thoughts on number 11 in the Y conference.
I don't mind at all, dude. At number 11, I have Nate. He said he'd be 12 at all. I don't think you were 12 in any of mine. I'm not the biggest fan of your drafts, but they're definitely, like, I can see how they will function well and how they can bring some heat. I really liked I think it was your Swish draft. Yeah, I actually found myself pretty pleased with the Swish one. At first, when you went round 1 Rillaboom, I was kind of like, oh boy, this draft's going to be interesting, but he rounded it out really well. And Noivern's actually a mon I really like in Swish. I think Gypsy King used it really well in ITL. And the speed tier is super nice, and he has some insane breakers, and just a whole bunch of momentum, like Rillaboom U-turn, Volcarona U-turn, Noivern U-turn, Rotom Wash full switch into breakers like Terrakion, and then he has got nice screens with Grimmsnarl. But his Ultra Sun and Moon and his ORS teams, I don't know, like his Ultra Sun and Moon I definitely can see being viable, just not something that I would personally draft. And then his ORS I thought was a little bit weird, but a couple transactions can easily fix it.
Yo, I totally feel you on that. Yeah, I'd be curious to see what Nate is going to do going forward. All I know is that I'm really excited to see him use Lunatone, because that is one of my favorite Pokemon. And I think he might have drafted it in the wrong gen, though. I think in Sword and Shield it might have some extra buffs that he could appreciate. But is what it is. It's still one of my favorite Pokemon regardless, and I hope he uses it. So going forward, we'll move on to number 10 in each conference, and that is going to be my boy Big Dick Nick in the X conference at number 10. Now, his drafts were kind of hard to rank because, like, almost all of the Pokemon on his teams I feel like are solid and Pokemon that I would use, but it's just that kind of like lack of fluidity throughout his draft. It doesn't really feel like the types complement each other, like there's the best either both offensive or defensive synergy. And with some of his late round picks being, or most of his teams kind of leaning towards being top heavy, I think that was part of the problem for me. Was like, all right, you have 6 really strong mons, but all of your teams have 10 Pokemon, and some of the ones at the bottom just don't look like ones that most people would want to bring often. If he's the type of person who is like adept at using lower tier mons and bringing them alongside the heavy hitters, then I think that could actually work really well. So that's why it was hard to rank. But I think overall, just looking at it, they don't look to be as hard to prep for as some others that may have 7, 8, or even 9 really, really powerful Pokemon that you always need to consider heavily in prep, because with some of those lower picks being ones that are kind of easy to prep for, or you could just kind of indirectly prep for them by prepping for the bigger threats. I think that's what could kind of take away from his teams. But overall, like I said, he's got a lot of powerful Pokemon. The fact that they are top heavy does mean that he has lots of power up top. So that, plus, like I said, if he's the type of person who can make good use of lower tier picks, I think that they are good drafts, just not necessarily good enough for me to think they're in the top 10.
So I have Scoot, I believe, at number 10, and I really liked his Oris draft. I had a lot of fun actually using it against you and some mocks for week 1. But his Ultra Sun and Moon feels like something I would like, and I'm kind of wondering why I didn't rate it higher. But I think, honestly, just all the Ultra Sun and Moon drafts are busted as all hell.
Yeah.
Like, you get some insane-looking drafts when you draft only 8 Pokemon, especially with what we decided to allow. And then, I just wasn't the biggest fan of his Swish. Like, it has the speed tier, which I would like, but there's kind of a huge gap from... I'm looking at it right now. I think it's Zeraora to Hydreigon. Tasserina's slow, Primera's slow. What's Golduck's speed?
Okay,
but I also don't really
85 or something. Yeah, that too.
Yeah, like, he has Zeraora, which is insane, like, nice speed tier, but then it drops all the way down to Hydreigon below base 100, so any mon in, like, the 120s and the upper teens can go Modest or Adamant and really take advantage of that. So that's kind of why I have him down a little bit. He does have really good hazard removal in Swish, but I don't think that's as big of a deal with how prevalent heavy-duty boots are.
Yo, very true. I'm curious to see what he does, especially in Sword and Shield, because I remember during our draft, he was just like, I am not familiar with this tier because I don't think he really played it yet, so it was taking him a while to make his
Also,
picks.
he had a couple makeup picks, right?
Yeah, that too.
Like, yeah, I think that hurt him a lot because, like, when you miss 5 or 6 mons, those are, like, in any round, especially in the earlier rounds, which I think he missed, like, a couple early mid ones. It can hurt a lot.
Yeah, considering how limited Sword and Shield's draft pool can be, then yeah, I definitely think that could hit him pretty hard. So curious to see how he bounces back from that. We had a really good week 1 game, so I'm not too worried about him in ORAS, but we'll see. So moving on to number 9 in both conferences, we have Ben for the X conference. Now, Ben's teams, literally, I ranked them all the same. Like, they just gave off such a similar vibe across the board, where they all had a lot of the tools that you would normally look for in a draft, but just not the, in my opinion, best Pokemon to do most of them. Like, they all just felt like, I guess, well-rounded, but not particularly strong in any department, like Jack of all trades, master of none sort of style, where I think that with adequate prep and good playing, he shouldn't really have a problem winning games. It's just that he doesn't really have as many heavy hitters or like major firepower, or even defensively. I thought his synergy sometimes could get like a little awkward or just kind of one-dimensional. So I thought that could hurt his drafts a little bit, but across the board, they were all very solid. So, like I said, with the kind of adequate prep and play, I am not worried about him winning games because last year he actually had the best record in the whole X conference. So if he plays like that again, without a doubt, I think he'll have a good season. It's just that...
It's kind of the definition of Ben drafts. Like, I've noticed that Ben's, they're always, like, really well-rounded, not really necessarily a weakness, but it's not something that makes you, like, jump out and go, holy shit.
Exactly, that's exactly how I felt.
But then his prep comes and you see a set and you're just like, holy shit. That's where I think the holy shit factor comes from.
Yeah, that's true. His prep is really, really creative. And even like this week 1, I know he didn't end up winning the game, but like he had really a cool prep, just kind of getting all the hazards up right from the beginning with like a Spore Smear goal, which was probably kind of unexpected. He just kind of got a little unlucky, but definitely interested to see what he does throughout the rest of the season, because he's got a Mega Latias again, and he had that last year, and it was only a Sun and Moon League, so he really messed people up with Mega Latias last year, and curious to see if he could do so again.
So, for number 9, I have Blitz. I have Blitz kind of like, so I did mine where I ranked them 1 through 12, and the total, and then I kind of broke them into tiers. Where like, okay, these three are kind of in a lower tier, these two are in a middle tier, these guys are in the upper tier, and then like these I think are elite. So I think Blitz is a little bit tier above, just because I don't think any of his drafts are bad per se. Just he doesn't have as many drafts where they're like in the top 4 or top 5 in my opinion. Like all of his I think I had in the 6 to 8 range or so. So I really liked his ORAS draft, and then I realized his ground resist I think is a Excel board, which if you want to call that a ground resist, good for you. But overall, I mean, it had insane hard hitters like Aegislash, Mega Medi, and then it had some like nice bulk. I mean, it has Blissey, so yeah.
Yeah.
And then I looked at his sumo and like I liked it because it has so his sumo kind of has like gimmicky offense, not necessarily straight up offense, where it has like, well, I mean it does, but it has Lele and Halucha, which like Halucha really benefits from that, and then it has kind of sand. So I'm not necessarily the biggest fan of like offense that's dependent on something. Where Halucha, it needs terrain to be insane, but like it's good outside, and then Excadrill and Mega Garchomp are solid outside of sand, but like obviously benefit the most in sand. And then I think his Swiss draft is overall solid. I didn't have like any big complaints, didn't have any big like, it's insane. It's actually a lot better than I originally thought it was, because I forgot Starmie's speed stat was good. For some reason when I looked at Starmie when I was first looking at this, I thought it was base 80 speed. I was like, wait, that's 115. He does have them on over base 100. So it is a really solid draft with like hard hitters and some nice solid bulk.
Yeah, for sure. Blitz is always been a good drafter, and he had Tapu Lele last season in UDL and had a really strong season with that, so I'm curious to see. I think he had Lucha too. I think so.
Didn't he also have Mega Zam?
And yeah, he definitely had Mega Zam. Definitely had Mega Zam, yep.
Yeah, that was a pretty insane draft.
Definitely. So I'm curious to see how he uses it again, because last season he showed that he's adept with that kind of style. So next up, moving on to number 8, we've got top tier boy in the X Conference. And top tier's drafts came out pretty nice, especially for someone who just doesn't really play much Pokemon. You know, he last time he played was UDL Season 1, which was literally a full year ago. And his draft was solid. He's always been pretty good at drafting, but he just didn't really put the effort into prepping and playing. But now he's got the kind of team that definitely requires a lot more careful prep and play in some of his drafts, namely his ORAS. But I really do think it's got all the tools to be a really solid ORAS team, and he showed that week 1 by taking down, in my opinion, which was one of the very best ORAS teams. So I do think that he's got everything, or most things that you'd want in most drafts. His Ultra Sun and Moon I thought was actually very good, because he's got just great Pokemon across the board, like Mew, Tornadus T, Weavile, Arcanine, Tangrowth, and then he got a really late round, like round 7, Excadrill. So
and he has Suicune also.
Yeah, he's got Suicune as well. So it's definitely a strong team. And then his Sword and Shield was actually starting off really good, and it pretty much stayed really good throughout most of it. But then at the end, I noticed he doesn't have even a ground resist, so no ground immunity, no ground resist. So that is definitely something he might want to consider fixing. I don't know, because he's got so much power that he could probably afford to work around it. But because he also has a good amount of natural bulk, I feel like it might serve him well to try to get some kind of ground resist or immunity. But we'll see. Overall, all of his drafts were good. 8 seems kind of low for how... what were you going to say?
I said I was going to make fun of him for his sumo, because I don't like Excadrill outside of sand. I think the Mon outside of sand is kind of cheeks, but then I play him week for the first sumo game, and I have a Mega T-Tar, so like, ah, shit.
Yeah, that's rough.
Fun fact, I think in sumo, he was the only guy not to draft a Mega, right?
I believe so, yep.
Yeah, let's...
Yep, no Mega, because I remember he was actually asking me some questions about his draft, and we talked about maybe getting some kind of Mega, but then I think we actually even talked about Mega Steelix, and then I was like, wait, Excadrill is still around. So that's kind of crazy. Maybe he'll make some moves and try to get a Mega later on, but right now his team looks good, so we'll see.
It's a solid team.
Yeah, definitely a solid team. So I wonder if it'll be better that way, or if he'll want to get a Mega at some point. But overall, yeah, 8 seems kind of low, because all of his drafts were 8 out of 10 or above, in my opinion, but everyone drafted really well, and because there's only 12 coaches in the league and we tend to allow some borderline Mons, I think that most of these drafts come out looking really, really powerful. So top tier boy at number 8. Let's see what he could do.
So I got TJ, my twin, and I really liked his ORAS draft. It's the Sand Sun team. I think similar to Isis, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And then I feel like, yeah, this is a guy, but I feel 8's too low also.
Yeah, definitely.
I did like his Swish team. And then, if I remember correctly, I wasn't the biggest fan of his Sumo team. Yeah, I have his Sumo and Swish team kind of around the 8, 9-ish number, and then I have his ORAS at number 2. So I really liked his ORAS. It's a proven core that works every single time. You always have something.
Yep.
And then, I'm looking at a Swish team, and I'm wondering what I don't like about it. It's just something doesn't fit right with me. But it's got the bulk. It has Slowbro and Incineroar, who could be a nice pivot, especially with boots, and it has speed. I just don't know if it has the best breaker per se. I think his highest, he has P2 and Barraskewda, but I'm not the biggest Barraskewda fan in the world. But it has Flip Turn now, so who knows? Could be a lot better.
Yep. Yeah, but I think he kept getting sniped too in Sword and Shield, so...
Yeah. So she was getting sniped every other day.
Yep.
No, but yeah, I know his prep, and I've worked on him with DPL before, and I know his prep will make up for any draft that's not the best. And ORAS, he said, I'm going quote-unquote 03, but we already know that's false.
Exactly. He's gotten off to a great start, so definitely interested to see what he's going to be doing going forward. He actually played, he filled in for someone last season, so he had to play with a team that he didn't draft on his own, and now So far, after drafting his own teams, things have been looking a lot better for him so far. So moving on to number 7 in both conferences, we have in X, Illusion. Now, Illusion was another one where like everybody from, I feel, top tier all the way down to the bottom, they were all like not necessarily a huge cluster, but it was just like pretty tight between all of them. I felt Illusion's drafts, his Oras was just really solid. I was like kind of torn between a 9 or a 10 on that one, because it just pretty much has most things that you would want in a draft. There was just something about it that didn't really jump out to me and say like, this thing just has so much power. These threats are so huge that it's a clean 10 out of 10. But I felt at the very least was a 9 out of 10. And yeah, across the board, just great Pokemon. Very versatile. Has solid bulk, solid power. Just he can do a lot with it. Then his Ultra Sun and Moon, he has a pretty solid looking team. He has some pretty solid lower price picks as well, which I think was cool, because the top half of his team has like a little bit of an awkward feel to it, in my opinion. But throughout his entire draft, all the Pokemon are good. They all have a solid amount of versatility, and it never really let up at the end, because his lower picks, I think, are pretty viable. So definitely a solid team. And then his Sword and Shield, I felt, was similar in the regard that like it's solid across the board, but doesn't really have any particular strengths that stand out to me that would make me think, wow, this is a really exceptional team. So overall, I think his teams were solid across the board, but especially his Oras being almost a 10 out of 10, I think is deserving of the number 7 spot at least.
Yeah, this is kind of where my big cluster takes place too. The next 5 guys are all like right there. I have Blue coming in at number 9. Or wait, no, my bad. We're at 7, right?
Yep.
Okay, yeah, Blue at number 7. I really liked his Oras and his Swish teams. I had those both in the top 4, but I was not the biggest fan of his Sumo team. I'll talk about the good first. So looking at his Swish team, I had this one, I think, at 4-3, and I really like it because I know the Sun, of course, late round Sun's pretty viable, and it has the speed stat, and then Draw Togekiss is a bit harder to break, and then Hippo Milotic are some fat boys. And then Urshifu singles I'm on that I think is going to be pretty insane in this meta. And then, of course, you got Gengar with Ghost Spam being at probably its highest it's been since, I don't know, since I've been playing at least. His Oras, let me get to it, sorry. Have me at the dock right now. I remembered I had this one in the top 3 also. Yeah, so he drafted a lot better Shaman Sky team than I did. He has really immediate threat, Shaman Sky, Infernape, Mega Pinsir. He has alright hazard removal with, I mean, Latios can go Defog. Then Fortress, of course, has Spin. It's an offense that I thought would overwhelm a lot of people.
Yeah, definitely.
But, I mean, people have outs to it, but he also can just, like, keep on pressure. And then, like, you, of course, have Manaphy with its Tail Glow shenanigans. The thing I didn't... Once again, there's not, like, a bad Ultra Sun, Ultra Moon team. I just think a whole bunch of them are a lot more busted than others.
Mm-hmm.
Where his team, I don't think it had necessarily the best bulk. Like, Kumo's a bulky boy, but it doesn't have, like, viable recovery outside of, like, I mean, Rest, I think, is it, right?
Yep.
Rotom Heat can be bulky, but you have to rely on Pain Split, Aegislash. Once again, I think you have to run Rest. Like, I think his only mon with immediate recovery is Roserade, which is typically something I don't like. And Roserade isn't, like, it drops the most physical moves.
Right.
So he has a bunch of, like, natural bulk, but not a bunch of recovery. So that's his, Ultra Sun, Ultra Moon is why I have him at 7 instead of, like, a top 4, top 5 team.
Right. Yeah, no, I would agree with that. I think that Blue's got some powerful drafts, and that Oras especially has just all the firepower in the world, so I'm curious to see how he'll use that going forward. Next week we have Sword and Shield 2, which I don't know if that's necessarily his best tier, but I know he did well in that in DPL, so at the very least I'm excited to see him in Sword and Shield next week. So moving on to number 6, the top half, we have at number 6 for X, we got Evan. Now, Evan's drafts were just like all really good. Like, it was just as simple as that. For his RS, I put how it was pretty much a solid team across the board, mostly all viable Pokemon, and then even a nice little steal at the bottom with Clefairy at number 2, or not at number 2, at 2 points, which is on paper might seem like it's fair, but that Pokemon is definitely quite good, especially in Sword and Shield, but also it's better probably in ORAS than it is in Sun and Moon because it has less of a power creep to deal with, and as you know how much Clefable can do, Clefairy can do a lot of that as well, just not quite to the same level, but still just having even a similar threat in the back, on top of all that like insane power that he has towards the top, is really cool. Same thing with his Ultra Sun and Moon, just across the board a lot of great Pokemon. The only Pokemon that I didn't love on his team, I'm trying to think of who it was. I know he had like the double poison. Oh, Barbaracle. Yeah, he had a Barbaracle on his team, which even that has a place in pretty much any meta, because just being able to potentially set up a Shell Smash and sweep an entire team is something that all teams kind of need to worry about and look out for. So even though I don't really like that taking up spot on a roster that much, it definitely has some high upside. So across the board, I think his USUM, Ultra Sun, Ultra Moon is really good. And then his Sword and Shield, that was one where I wasn't sure if I was underselling it a little bit. I still thought it was like a solid 8 out of 10 because all of his Pokemon, same thing across the board, are solid like his other drafts. But the thing with Sword and Shield is like once you go from Sun and Moon and then look at Sword and Shield, you're like, oh wow, this looks kind of weak. But then you realize that the draft pool is just so much more limited. There's no Z moves, there's no Megas. So I was like not sure.
Hard to do.
Yeah, exactly. I was like, I should probably go back and look at some of these Sword and Shields later and compare them more relatively to each other, but I just never really did. So I thought his Sword and Shield was good, but just not particularly stand out in many ways. But I think that's what a lot of the Sword and Shield teams kind of are, because either you kind of get all of the tools that you feel that you need and like cover all your bases, or you kind of like lean towards a certain style and stack up on that a little bit, in my opinion at least. So overall, Evan's drafts are great, and curious to see how he's going to use them.
So I think I have II at 6.
Yep.
Yeah. So I liked. I was a fan of all of his drafts. I had them all in like the 5 to 7 tier. I think all 3 of them were just like middle of the pack, which is why he's number 6. His Swish draft is pretty cool. It's just a whole bunch of insane offense with Toxapex. So he has Libero Cinderace, which is absolutely insane.
Yep.
Weavile, so the speed's there. And then he has Celebi, which can be like healing or support, can be nasty plot. Big Breaker and Mamo, Trapper and Magnezone. And then he has like Hitmonlee, which can run the Unburdened sets with like Psychic Seed with Indeedee, which I thought was sick. And then his last 3 picks are all Unburdened. He has like Unburdened Driftbloom and Unburdened Slurpuff. So his whole draft just screams speed offense and then like a Pex to wall hits.
Yeah.
So I thought that was pretty unique and fun. I had that one pretty high.
Definitely.
I think the only draft I was semi-low on was his ORAS one, because his Ultra Sun and Moon had a Shaman Sky with Z moves. I think could be a lot better because you can spam a bit more.
Right.
And I mean, he has Mega Glade, which is, I think you had, would you have it number 3 on your power ranking video?
Oh yeah, I have that all the way up there. Yep.
Yeah, the Mon's insane. It's well proven. Necrozma, which I feel like is now just a Trick of Eye special, and I didn't really see a weakness in his Swish. And then looking at his ORAS right now, and yeah, I mean, it was solid. It wasn't something where I was like, oh, it's a bad team at all by any stretch of imagination. I just didn't have it as high up as others. Yeah, I mean, it has a Megalodios, Skarmory, Victini core. It's pretty insane.
Yep, he's definitely got the threats.
Yeah, there wasn't, so like, kind of here on, it's not like a draft that I thought was bad. It's just, with the amount of broken mons we allowed, you're going to have some drafts that are just a lot more busted than others.
For sure. Yeah, I would totally agree with that. So moving on to the top 5, we have, for the X Conference, Sebi VGC. Now, Sebi really, really killed it with his drafts for the most part. Let me scroll down to my notes. Yeah, I thought his ORAS was by far his weakest because it was solid for like the first a little more than half or so, but then I felt kind of dropped off. I felt it was one of the bigger examples
I
of.
like his ORS. What the heck?
I like it. It's just I felt it was one of the bigger instances of being a top-heavy team. So I felt like he's got the really really nice bulk at the top, as well as some nice setup and decent power. But then after that, it just kind of drops and is like, like he's got the rest of his Pokemon are like viable enough, I guess, to kind of fill some of the gaps. But overall, it just didn't have that kind of like cohesivity, or even like he's really strong defensively, but didn't have quite as much breaking power as I would have liked to think it was a more well-rounded team. So overall, his RS was my least favorite of his teams, but that isn't really saying much, or that is saying much, because the rest of his teams were just so good that, oh no, it isn't saying much. I had it right at first. The rest of his teams were so good that his RS just, I felt, wasn't nearly as good in comparison. So moving on to his Sun and Moon, pretty ridiculous team. I just gave it a 10 out of 10. I thought that it was super busted team.
Sorry, Maddie. Can you still hear me?
Yeah, I could hear you.
Okay, sorry, I had a headphone malfunction. It went blank for a quick second.
All good. Yeah, I loved his Sun and Moon team. He's got Darkrai, Mega Mawile, and just like a whole batch of threats. Every Pokemon in this team pretty much
Holy shit.
is viable, and
That's crazy.
yeah, it's insane. I'm definitely a big fan of his Sun and Moon draft because it's just got so much power, but it does have the kind of natural bulk that you'd kind of want even on an offensive team that allows you to either pivot back and forth every now and then, or just stay in and not be forced out so easily, because he's got the kind of natural bulk. He's got the speed to revenge things, and just lots of different options that make his team look extremely difficult to prep for. So I think his Ultra Sun and Moon was amazing. And then his Sword and Shield too, just really, really solid. I felt that it wasn't quite as high as Noah ranked it when he did his power rankings. I think he had that as the number one Sword and Shield team, because he really loves the Libero Cinderace and Corviknight, and I do love Libero Cinderace, but I don't really think Corviknight is a top mon, like a first round mon necessarily. Like I do think that, especially with the Pokemon we allowed, that it probably is round 2 at best, but Corviknight obviously has,
I agree.
yeah, like Corviknight does have a lot of versatility though. There's so much that it could do that you always have to prepare for a lot when trying to like fully check or counter it. So I think with some just like really, really viable Pokemon across the board, Sebi has a lot of options to make that team work. And yeah, overall his drafts are great. Like I said, his RS being the lowest of the 3 didn't really mean that much, because I still think his RS is good. It's just that his other 2 teams were great, especially that Ultra Sun and Moon is pretty insane. So yep, that was my thoughts on Sebi's.
Okay, so I guess I lied, because next up I have Silver, and Silver, I have his ORS in the bottom 3, but I have his Sumo and his Swish both in the top 3, so that's why he's way up here. Looking at his ORS, it is a team that, like, I feel most people would love to have. It's just not necessarily a playstyle that I like. He has the Lando Eye, which I'm not the biggest fan of Lando Eye.
Yeah, same.
And then Mega Manetric, who's, solid, but never a mon that I consider insane. And then he rounds it out pretty well. He has like Ferrothorn, Latios, Floridas, Blastoise, Drapion, and I'm pretty sure ORS is his tier, right? That's his main one?
Yep.
So, obviously he knows what he's doing, so I'm not going to like slam him or anything for that. And he can use his team really well. I really loved his Swish team. I think I had a Swish team at number 2, I remember correctly. It's just, I found it insane.
Yeah.
Galarian Darm, I have no clue how it felt to him at the last
I know.
I was really shocked with that. He got Scizor round 5 when everyone's saying Scizor is going to be a lot better in this meta.
Yeah, true.
Necrozma is pretty insane, just because of some of the buffs it got. It has Dragon Dance now, right?
Yep.
And then Koma Ozamon, that's always going to be up there. I really like his Swish team, and then his Ultra Sun, Ultra Moon team I thought was like top 3, top 4.
Absolutely,
didn't
yeah.
have like a big killer weakness to me. I mean, I guess its weakness would be Trick Room Healing Wishmaster.
Yeah, his, prepping for his Sun and Moon team was wild. It's really, really good.
Yeah, it's a team that it looks like it just yeah, that's a UDL team. Has to be.
Right.
So yeah, that's what I have Silver at my top 5.
Yep, definitely excited to see him use that Sword and Shield team next week because, like, with me being at number 11 and both Melmetal and Galarian Darm being like still available, I'm just like, this is insane. Like, is there any chance that I get both? But no, he took the Darm, which, you know, he definitely should have. So, yeah, excited to see him use that team because I felt like I just kept seeing both of us because we were at the wheel just get steals. So, hyped to see him with that. So, moving on to number 4 in each conference. For number 4, I have Kaz, and what did I write about his? Yeah, so Kaz's teams across the board were probably the most consistent in my opinion. Like, I had them all ranked at 9 out of 10 actually, and I know he feels like the most strongly about his RS team, I believe, and I know RS is his like favorite tier, but even so, I actually had the main thing from his RS team that was keeping it from a 10 in my opinion was just how like not all, but a lot of the speed tiers were pretty clustered. Like, he had a lot between like 90 and 102, which is
100.
Exactly.
95, 86. Yeah.
Right? They're all so close together that like his Garchomp was his fastest Pokemon, which Garchomp is a solid choice Scarfer option, but obviously can just do so much more that you don't always want to have to rely on that. And Victini is obviously a good Scarfer too, but it's just like the speed tiers definitely I felt hurt it a little bit, enough to take it down from a 10 to a 9. But other than that, like, it's just really well-rounded, has pretty solid synergy, amazing offensive and defensive capabilities, and the fact that he got Mega Gardevoir at like pick number 7 was insane. That's one of his favorite Pokemon to use, and he's definitely got the type of team that I think fits it really nicely. So I think he's going to do well in RS with that team. But then next up for his Ultra Sun and Moon, it was just so threatening that even though I feel like it might not be his preferred style of team, I just felt like it is so powerful that it was hard for me to not give it a 9 out of 10. I was like really debating that one a little bit, but overall I felt it had enough natural bulk and well-roundedness to just take that like offensive presence, or have that offensive presence take it to the next level, making it a 9 out of 10 instead of maybe an 8 out of 10. And then same thing with his Sword and... What's up?
I think the only thing with his Sun Moon possibly holding it back would be like it's really specially based.
That is true.
Lele, Gren, but then I mean Terrakion and Megalodios can go like DD set.
Yep, that's true too. And obviously Lele having Psyshock as well, which makes it like a pretty crazy physical breaker in some ways. So that's kind of cool. So yeah, I can see that. There's definitely like a bit of awkwardness and the synergy there, as it's just extremely offensive, which personally I do appreciate. But yeah, yeah, it does. Like, just thinking about how you're going to prepare for that team is pretty nuts. And I think with the ability of someone like Kaz will make that work really well. So I'm interested to see how that goes. And then his Sword and Shield was just a very well-rounded team in my opinion. Like, I was looking at it and I was just like, I know he was complaining about having the last pick in that draft and saying how all the good things were taken, but just all the picks that he made I felt were really solid and give him all the tools to basically win every matchup that he's in. So even if he doesn't have like the kind of star power that some of the earlier drafts have, which is just kind of the product of the nature of the Sword and Shield draft pool, because we're obviously doing the first DLC meta, which has a good amount more than the like pre-home DLC meta, but yeah, which is that was very restrictive in my opinion. But this yeah, it's restrictive enough to kind of prevent some of the later teams from getting quite as much firepower as some of the earlier ones. But regardless, I feel he did the best with what he had available to him, and just has an extremely well-rounded team that is no less than a 9 out of 10 in my opinion.
Yeah, I saw that he put in general, I don't know if you got to read it, where he said his hot prediction was is Oras was going to be top 2, Sun and Moon top 5, and then fodder for his swish. But I don't see what's wrong with his swish. Like, I feel like he kind of fell into the trap of like comparing his swish to his Ultra Sun and Moon on Oras. Where, like, I mean, if you do that, then yeah, it's a booty team. But if you compare it to the other Swish teams, it's right up there with all of them.
Yep, it's so true. Like, I feel like his Sword and Shield is just one of the, if not the most well-rounded one out there that just, I feel is really reliable. And
like when you compare it to other Swish teams instead of to your Ultra Sun and Moon team, it looks insane.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that one was good. Yeah. I liked his drafts a lot. I think he's got some really good teams, and curious to see how he's going to make them work.
So for number 4, I have you, actually.
All right.
And so if I remember, I ranked your Oras in top 3, and then I had you middle of the pack for Sun and Moon and Swish. Looking at your Oras, you got a insane Mega Guard team, and I think Mega Guard's probably the best mon in the Oras meta.
Yep.
I mean, might not be what we allowed, but typically it's the best mon in the Oras meta. And at first when I saw your draft, because we were talking over our Oras drafts together as we did it, I thought the Talonflame Weavile was going to be really 2 rocks weak, but Employon and Scizor kind of make up for that. And you can just have really good momentum into some insane breakers. And then Ultra Sun and Moon, I believe it was... there was one mon that I like absolutely loved on your draft. Yeah, Mesprit, of course, because I saw you use that last season. You use Mesprit like no one else does with your Healing Wish, your Trick Room. A couple times in Mox, you got me a Choice Scarf, and when I saw that mon on the team, I was like, okay. The only thing I didn't like on this draft was a little bit lack of speed, just because I don't think Alolan Persian's the best mon in the world.
Yep.
But it also, I mean, it can revenge the 110s like Mega Latioses and stuff, and like hit Glade and stuff for foul play, which is insane. And then your Swish draft I thought was really solid. What was I going to say about this one? Oh yeah, getting Melmetal round 11 is insane, and then I'm a huge Hatterini supporter, and I know you use Delma like a god that you are, so yeah, overall I really liked your drafts, and I think I have you number 4.
Yeah, thank you. I liked them too for the most part. I liked my like, I think all my drafts, at least they just look fun to use. So I was just like, they look good enough to get the job done, but also really fun that I will never really have a matchup where I'm like, wow, prep for this sucks, or this is just really boring, or I really have hated in the past just kind of drafting purely to win and then just feeling like, all right, this team is pretty boring. Like, I could just kind of bring a lot of the same sets every single week, whereas I feel like with this, even if I do bring a lot of the same sets here and there, I think that it will be in a way that's more fun for me. But yeah, I could kind of think the same. My Oras, like, the power on that team is pretty insane. So my Sun and Moon and Sword and Shield aren't quite as powerful up front, but I definitely like most of the picks that I got. Don't know if I'll make any changes anytime soon, but yeah, curious to see how that goes for myself.
Started off 2-0, so it doesn't look like it.
We'll see. We'll see. I'm definitely excited to use these teams. The Sword and Shield one looks really fun too, because it's just, I have the least experience in that tier, and there are just so many things that I want to use that I haven't used, and a lot of those things are on my team. So I'm excited for that going forward. So now moving on. What are you gonna say?
You only played ITL, right?
Yeah, I only played ITL, and then I played that Cash Gang.
Oh, yeah. The manga teams.
I know, I didn't even have a single Gen 8 mon.
Gen 8 mon.
Exactly. Yep, exactly. So, yeah, definitely not as experienced in Sword and Shield, but it looks like it's going to be a lot more fun now without being as restrictive. So moving on to the top 3, finally, we have in the X Conference, the GOAT, Aki VGC. I did not rank him at number 1, to maybe the surprise of a lot of people, but he was definitely close. I felt like with his RS draft, it was basically a 10. Like, it wasn't really, I think, his normal style of bulky offense, because it's a lot more offensive. But regardless, has most things I think a draft would want. It pretty much fulfills all those roles that you would normally plan out for a draft. And then he's got Darkrai, which is probably going to be one of the best mons in the meta. as well as fixing up kind of that, I guess, quote-unquote lack of bulk that he normally goes for with some late picks, like having Chansey being the like fattest special wall in the game, and then Avalog being one of the fattest physical walls in the game. Just giving him the option in case he needs it, whereas the rest of his team does have solid natural bulk, but just like I said, not as much as he normally goes for, with having lots of mons with reliable recovery and but the power on that team, the offense, the well-roundedness, I think all is warranting of a 10 out of 10 on that team. Whereas his Ultra Sun and Moon was just a really solid balance of everything. I felt, even though he might think that's a little more offensive than he normally goes, I do think that his Sun and Moon team is just a really good bulky offense team that is basically like a 9 out of 10 to me. I think it's just really well-rounded. Then moving on to his Sword and Shield team, it's very powerful. It's extremely offensive, but kind of lacks the kind of fluidity and cohesion that I would like for an offensive team personally. But because he's just got so many ridiculous threats, it's going to be so hard to prepare for him every week. And if he can adapt better to that style, then I think that could be, from an 8 out of 10 team to like a 10 out of 10 team. But with all that power alone, I don't think I could rank it any lower than an 8. So overall, he has fantastic drafts in all 3 tiers. Even if they don't fit his style necessarily, I don't think it should be too hard to get used to because they're just so powerful. So I'm curious to see how it goes. It already went pretty well for him week 1. So we will see going forward.
All right, at number 3 for me, I have Shuckle King. And I think his Oras draft is probably by far the best draft in the Y Conference. It's kind of insane.
It's
he has
godly.
Darkrai, Torn T, Terrakion, Mega Zam, and then bulkier stuff like Heatran, Gliscor, and Slowbro.
Yep.
And then kind of interesting double grass core with Lilligant, who's a good quiver dancer, and then Roselia with spikes. We already saw this draft in action, and it was kind of insane. And then I was also a huge fan of his Ultra Sun, Ultra Moon team. Mega Zam has quickly become one of the most prevalent, if not the most prevalent mon in the Ultra Sun, Ultra Moon tier. He got that round 2, so he also has Celesteela, Infernape, Latios, Drapion, Rotom-Mow, Rhyperior, Milotic. This just looks like a team that, if I were a substitute coach, would want to take over this team.
Yeah.
And then, the draft I was down on, actually, was his Sword and Shield team. I think I have this one at, 9 or 10, and that's the reason why he's not number 1, because when you have, 1 and number 3, you'd assume to be number 1. But, I mean, he's still number 3, and, who was it? I believe Noah ranked this team in his top 4 or top 5, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, so, I mean, this could just be my personal bias, which, I mean, makes sense, but other people think that this is one of the top 4 teams out of all 24. So, yeah, I mean, his drafts are insane.
Yeah, I think he really did well with these drafts. Yep, I'm hyped to see how he's going to do with them going forward because it's already gotten off to a good start. So, moving on to the...
Excited to see Zarude.
Yeah, that too. That's one of the things that's kind of hard to rank for us too. A lot of the Urshifu and Zarude teams are just like, all right, they look good or maybe we're not sure because we just haven't really seen them perform yet. But still, they look like pretty good Pokemon across the board, especially I think the Urshifu forms. So without even having seen them perform yet, I think it's safe to say that those are going to be pretty powerful Pokemon. So moving on to the top 2, we've got in the X Conference, Ice Demon Gray at number 2. Yes, I actually have Ice at number 2, which is funny because I don't even think he drafted most of his Sword and Shield team. So shout outs to Ben for helping him with that.
I think Ben drafted almost all of his teams.
That's so funny. Shout outs to Ben if he drafted Ice's team because I put Ben at number 9 and then Ice all the way up at number 2. But I think that his Oras team is just kind of like TJ's team, extremely powerful, just has the amazing Sanzard Y core with other fantastic mons like Mew and Azumarill that just make it really, and Gengar too, make it really tough for him to have a bad matchup. So just having that, especially in a tier that he isn't experienced in, is really, really good for him. So kudos to him for getting a team like that. He even has Victory Bell at the end of his draft, which is a powerful Pokemon in general, like just offensively, but in the Sun, it's a huge threat. So that is another really cool addition to his team. And his Ultra Sun and Moon, that one I was really debating between 9 and 10, because when you look at those Pokemon, they're just all really good. And I think it lacked like a little bit of breaking power for me to say, all right, this is like a definite 10. But overall, the fact that he's got Magearna, by far the best Pokemon in the format, in my opinion, and then he's got backed up with like Mega Lopunny, Crocodile, Manaphy. I think he's got like a Latios on there too. Definitely a well-balanced team, having the kind of like natural bulk and breaking power that you'd probably want going into most games. Something that could honestly be a 10 out of 10 or a 9 out of 10 in my opinion, just depending kind of on how he uses it. But I think overall it looks pretty darn good, and like his Oras and Sun and Moon core is pretty amazing. Then moving on to his Sword and Shield team, just same thing as most of actually this one really did like seem a little more like a Ben team to me, because it was just really solid across the board. He had like the Gloom at the end, which is actually a pretty good value pick for 1 point. And yeah, I didn't really see many particularly big flaws in his Sword and Shield team, but it just didn't jump out to me as many as some of the others, where I felt they really had a particular amount of power or threatening nature to them that is just going to be really, really difficult in prep.
I feel that. So number 2 for me, I had Rob Jr. The man can draft, I can tell you that.
Yeah.
I believe he had a late pick in Oras. Yes, he had the wheel pick, I'm pretty sure. And he got the Chomp, Jirachi, Mega Diancie core, which I think is an insane core, especially when you add Zapdos, Milotic, and Tangrowth. Like, those are 7 Mons. Each of them can come every single week, especially when you have another like Mienshao, which is really solid. So I really liked his Oras team. His Ultra Sun, Ultra Moon team, I thought was, I believe I had this one at number 2 or number 1. Has Darkrai, Torrentee, Terrakion, Suicune, Tapu Bulu. It's kind of just insane what this man has. Seeing Darkrai's on team is pretty interesting. And then his Swish, I know Noah had him, I believe, in the top 5 or an honorable mention, and I have him pretty high. I don't have him that high. I think I have him like number 5 in Y Conference. So if you accumulate, that's probably like a top 10 draft overall.
Yep.
But yeah, he has one of the Urshifu forms. Corviknight, who we both discussed is a solid Mon, and then Reuniclus, who I think is going to be insane in this meta. Pretty excited to see it used.
Yeah, definitely.
It lacks a little bit of speed, because, I mean, Whimsicott's his fastest Mon, but it's also not necessarily a Mon that, like, you don't think of it necessarily as a great, like, revenge Mon. You typically think of it more as, like, a support, like, Tailwind, U-Turn, Leech Seed, Spore kind of stuff.
Right.
I don't know if it gets Spore. I might have just said move it as
just like Stun Spore, yeah.
Okay. But overall, it's still a solid draft with some insane breakers and just a whole bunch of stuff that it can do. And overall, I think all of his drafts were in the top 5 for me. Yeah, top 5, and then I had his Sun and Moon at like top 2. So I have him number 2 overall.
Yep, I totally feel that. I feel like my top 3 people that I've ranked are all kind of like at least in top 5 in each tier or like close to it. Actually, surprisingly, that's a little bit of a lie. As you're going to see, the number 1 person who's coming up next is, for number 1 in both conferences, starting with X, we have Bay Crick. Now, Bay Crick is...
Whoa. Who said you could call him that?
Well, I mean, I figured, he was telling me that, I don't know, I just stole the name, I'm sorry. I'm very sorry.
That's not okay. We're going to have to cut that out.
First, I ranked you at number 11. Then I try to take your man all on one stream. That's crazy. But, yeah.
Matt, you know what? You're down at 8 now. Congratulations, Nate. You're going up.
Yep. That's how it goes sometimes. So, for number 1 in the X Conference, I put K-Crick, who I feel just totally kind of stole both RS and Sun and Moon, which is funny because like I know going into this he was someone who hadn't played RS before, so he was worried about that. But I thought that was probably the easiest 10 to give because he just has one of like the best and most well-rounded assortment of Pokemon that I think I've seen in a while. And I'm not even a big fan of Megalodios that much. I think maybe in ORAS it could be better than it has been in Sun and Moon, which is where I've seen it more than in ORAS. But I still don't think it's like this groundbreaking Pokemon necessarily. Like I wouldn't put it in the top 5 Mons available. But regardless, he's just got an amazing team with really, really good bulk, great speed tiers, awesome breaking power, and just his entire roster is really viable and all kind of serves a purpose on his entire draft. The Pokemon just all support each other really nicely, and I felt it was pretty much a no-brainer to put it at...
Confirm. It's not nice to face.
Yeah.
At week 1.
I know, I felt bad for you with that. Like, that was just an uphill battle from the start because that is just a really strong team where I would be surprised if he really went into a match feeling like he just totally had a bad matchup because his Pokemon are just so good. So yeah, kudos to him for drafting such a powerful team in the tier that he was the least confident in, because I think that's really going to help. Obviously, he is a very high skill level, so I'm sure he'll be able to learn ORAS quickly enough. It's just that having a great team to start is always a great boost. So his ORAS team, phenomenal. Then his Ultra Sun and Moon team, I debated a little bit between 9 and 10, but I ultimately settled on a 10 because I just think it's like so ridiculous and powerful that like the flaws that I thought it had were just kind of like minor nitpicks, where I thought maybe he lacked like a little bit of immediate breaking power and also relies a little bit on Mega Scizor for hazard removal. But that's not necessarily a bad thing because Mega Scizor can do a lot even while like carrying Defog, and obviously he doesn't have to bring Talonflame that often. So if he doesn't bring Talonflame, he's not really as reliant on the removal. But overall, he's got Naga, and that's a Pokemon that I used last season that I don't think is like the most intuitive Mon, but like if you put the work in to support this Pokemon, it can just be insane. The amount of upside is crazy, and I think he's done a good job with that with his draft because he has great momentum. Some real, like I know I said he kind of like lacks a little bit of breaking power, but I meant kind of across the board. But he does have one of the best breakers in the tier in Landorus Eye. So he's got some Pokemon that just break for Naga really, really well. And
he also has last round Bulu, right?
Yeah, and he's got the last round Bulu, which kind of seeing that at the end there, also removing a lot of his team's ground weakness, I just felt was deserving of, or Earthquake weakness at the very least, I thought was deserving of a 10 out of 10 because he's just got insane threats, great, like really, really solid, well-rounded across the board. A lot of great Pokemon. His entire team, just like his ORAS, is pretty much viable in my opinion. So that's a big deal. Makes use of all 10 Pokemon. And yeah, just an amazing team. And he's obviously been very successful in Sun and Moon for a while now. So that plus that team is going to be a sight to see. That is for sure. So going on to his Sword and Shield team, as I was saying before, with the top 3 people that I ranked, I felt like it really started to become where like all of their teams were towards the top of my rankings in each respective tier. But I think that for him, I actually did not like his Sword and Shield team at first glance very much. I actually ended up appreciating it and raising it up a bit, a little more once I realized that he's got that nice Sun Core with Venusaur, which is actually really, really threatening. I think that actually boosts his team quite a bit. Because at first I just didn't love it. I felt like it was just very unremarkable. There really wasn't much to it that was like particularly impressive to me, especially considering his first 2 picks are both Zeraora and Jirachi, 2 Pokemon that I believe are personally overrated. I think that they could do a lot. They could both do a lot.
We've had a couple combos about that.
Yeah, for sure. Both me and Aki are pretty high on the Zera being overrated bandwagon. I haven't played as much Sword and Shield, so I don't really know how Zera does there comparatively, but losing hidden power is kind of annoying. But without a doubt, both Jirachi and Zera are pretty versatile, so with someone of his skill level, it's not like he can't turn those into top 2 round picks. It's just that compared to some of the other drafts that have more immediate threats, I just didn't see his team as a whole being particularly scary until I kind of got to the bottom. And that's the thing. At first, I didn't even realize, like, oh, he's got the Sun Core. So I'm like, oh, like Venusaur, then Torkoal. That's kind of random. But then when I realized, oh, okay, yeah, he's got Venusaur Sun potential, that actually does add a lot of depth to his team, in my opinion, because he originally, like, didn't have the greatest speed tiers, and, like, Zera just being the one really, really fast Pokemon, but not even, like really particularly great choice scarfers, in my opinion, especially with Jirachi being one of the bulkier Pokemon on his team. So I wasn't a huge fan at first glance, but overall I do think it is a solid team. I probably wouldn't rank it much more than like a 7 out of 10, honestly, but his other two teams were a clean 10 out of 10. So because he just had such broken Oras and Sun and Moon teams where I feel like he's always going to have a good matchup, and then his Sword and Shield was versatile enough for him to make the most of it, I feel like he is deserving of the number 1 spot in the X Conference.
Yeah, I was talking to him as we've drafted, and then I played him week 1 in Oras, got my butt handed to him, and I've mocked him in Sun and Moon and got my butt handed to him. Can confirm those 2 drafts are insane.
Yeah, for sure.
So for number 1 in the Y Conference, I have the other kind of top tier, generally renowned as a top tier guy that decided to join this season with Mr. Hiker Toad. And I believe I had his Oras I had in the top 5, and then I had 1 and 1 for Sun and Moon and Swish. So kind of same as you, where like 2 of his drafts I felt were like the best draft out of all of them, and then 1 of them I thought was a bit more middle of the pack. I'll start with the 2 insane ones. His Swish tier, I believe you said it, just mid-draft, one-stop Hiker.
Yeah, it was insane.
Yeah, Excadrill Sand is pretty insane this meta, especially with a Dragapult. Rotom Heat, I think is probably the Mon, personally, that might have improved most from Gen 7 to Gen 8.
Yeah, seriously.
Because of heavy-duty boots and Nasty Plot, where Overheat is now a lot more spammable. And then Galarian Weezing is a Mon that we kind of learned in ITL of how insanely bulky it is.
Yeah, that's amazing
it's just
Pokemon.
A nasty draft overall, combining that with like a universally accepted top 10 player, top 5. It's going to be insane. Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon, he copied the Crit Core.
Oh, that's right.
He drafted first by like 5 hours.
Yeah.
Nagadel, Lando, and Mega Scizor is just absolutely insane.
Yep.
Don't know how everyone allows that.
Yeah, in both conferences.
Weavile, and Swampert are all great mons, and then Celebi I think is an underrated Z move user. I think it can be especially nice because you can spam Leaf Storm a little bit more.
Yep.
And then you got Gramble for the pesky fighting Megas, and then he has to have a Rotom form, of course, so Rotom fan. And then Oras, while I said it's kind of a middle of the pack, it's also a draft that I really, really like. I think I actually built, not this draft per se, because points-wise it didn't work, but I built a Lando Mew Wash Snorlax Aerodactyl core for a DPL team, and that's when you can't get sniped at all.
Right.
And he got that on an actual team, which is kind of insane.
Yeah.
It's a little lackluster when compared to like his other 2 drafts, but it's also just kind of godly. You just can't be missing too many stone edges with Lando and Aerodactyl, and you'll be fine.
Yep, definitely. I think Hiker killed it this season with his drafts. I think both of these guys have already made a really solid impression so far with their drafting abilities alone, so I'm really curious to see how the rest of their seasons will go. I'm hyped to see it. And anything else you want to say before we wrap this up?
Nope. I think that's pretty good.
Yeah, definitely. Only a little over an hour, so it's not nearly as bad as my Mega Evolution tier list, thankfully.
Yeah, this would have been 3 hours if we would have ranked all of X, or all of Oras and all of Sumo, then all of Swish.
I know.
Every individual person.
Exactly. So I think it was more appropriate that we did it this way. If you guys want to see Carson's like Google Doc that he sorted out to just kind of like put all 3 in each tier, I can make one too if you guys really want to see that. But I feel like
Yeah, I can post that in announcements. And of course, if you have any questions, feel free to ask us. But as we said at the start of the video, a lot of this is just subjective to like what's our play style.
Exactly. And drafting by far is going to be the least important aspect of this season, especially considering we have like a pretty good amount of transactions throughout all three drafts. The fact that you can use most of them on one that maybe doesn't hold up as well as the others is definitely allows people to work around drafts a lot more. And like I said, in the draft format, there's just so many possibilities that most matchups are going to be winnable. Like, it's hard to come by a matchup that's genuinely unwinnable. So as long as you put in the effort, as long as you think outside the box, you'll be able to figure something out. So yeah,
If not, just tax the living shit out of them.
you could exactly. You could always do that. My boy Illusion yesterday was like, "I'm bringing nature power on Shaman Sky and just freezing everybody."
I want to run the substitute leech seed headbutt set.
Yes, that'll be funny. So yeah, with that being said, that'll wrap up the post-draft power rankings for UDL Season 2. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Hopefully it wasn't too long, and I really enjoyed having you on here with me, Carson. Anything you want to say before we wrap it up?
I'll try and be on a couple more videos going through. Gotta let the corruptness seep into the channel.
Yeah, exactly, guys. He's going to turn me into a bad egg, so definitely do your best to make sure you don't let Carson get to you too. And with that being said, hope you all have yourselves a fantastic day and a fantastic weekend. And yeah, I'll see you all in the next one. Later.